Hello, I'm glad you made it back. We are having a blast going through Genesis. We're in Genesis 22. We're going to do Genesis 22 and 23 today. I know I sound like a broken record, but if you like and share and comment, it does help other people see this. So that's the main advantage of that. It's not about making money or making me important. I'm not making money off of this. I have made a little bit off of it, but I promise I'm doing this because I want to do it, not for that. I'm not against money, but uh, I would be more than happy to just know I'm sharing with the world. So, chapter 22 of Genesis, and I'm going to read from the Immersed Bible, the New Living Translation. Uh, but only if I'm on the right page. Otherwise, I'm not going to read the right thing. That's how you know this is not edited and perfect. I'm not sure about this hair here. Let me kill that. Okay. Uh, it says, sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. Abraham, God called. Yes, he replied, here I am. Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will show you. The next morning, Abraham got up early. That's important, underline stuff, because he didn't wait around. He didn't pray about it. He didn't talk to other people about it. He just got up and did what God told him to do. He saddled his donkey and took two of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire for a burnt offering and set out for the place God had told him about. On the third day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Stay here with the donkey, Abraham told his servants, and the boy and I will travel a little further. We will worship there, and then we will come right back. Now, this is important because he thought they were going to give a burnt offering, but he didn't think it would be Isaac. He just wasn't looking at it that way. So Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders while he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them walked on together, Isaac turned to Abraham and said, Father. Yes, my son, Abraham replied. We have the fire and the wood, and the boy said, but where's the sheep for the burnt offering? See, he knew what was required in a burnt offering. Even though we're not to Leviticus yet, this was still pretty standard operating procedures. God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son, Abraham answered, and they both walked on together. When they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Yes, Abraham replied, here I am. Don't lay a hand on the boy, the angel said. Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. Now, I know like people like to argue because of this part that maybe he did know the whole time and he just wasn't telling Isaac the truth. But I think he had faith that God was going to provide what he needed, just like he had his entire life. Even though it took 100 years for a lot of these things to come to fruition, he believed God. So that's just my theory. I can't necessarily prove it. So then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in place of his son. Abraham named the place Yahweh Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. To this day, people still use that name as a proverb. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. Then the angel of the Lord called again to Abraham from heaven. This is what the Lord says, because you have obeyed me and not withheld even your son, your only son, I swear by my own name that I will certainly bless you. I will multiply your descendants beyond number, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will conquer the cities of their enemies, and through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. All because you obeyed me. That's the impact of obedience. Then they returned to the servants and traveled back to Beersheba, where Abraham continued to live. Soon after this, Abraham heard that Milcah, his brother Nahor's wife, had borne Nahor 8 sons. The oldest was named Uz, and the next oldest was Buz, followed by Kemuel, the ancestor of the Arameans, Kesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlap, and Bethuel. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. She'll become important. In addition to these 8 sons from Milcah, Nahor had 4 other children from his concubine Reumah. Their names were Tibah, Gaham, Tahash, and Maacah. Now, that's chapter 26, and we can disagree on whether he knew or whatever, but the obedience is the important part. That's the part that matters the most. So it starts off after these things. This was just a Hebrew idiom. It means basically eventually. It's not a hard one to figure out, but basically about 20 years have passed. So this event is the peak of Abraham's life. In Hebrew culture, it's got a name. It's called the Akedah, which means the bind or the binding, to bind or the binding. What seemed to Abraham as his firstborn son was sent away, Ishmael. Then, as Ishmael is near death, a well miraculously appears. So he made it. Abraham is now called on to give up his son Isaac, the son God and Abraham considered to be the firstborn, because God told him that. We're told that God was testing Abraham because God didn't want it to look like he was asking for human sacrifice. God says at the beginning, this is a test of his faith. Abraham was in Beersheba. It's about 50 miles from Jerusalem. So he had a pretty good walk and think time, as to what was going to happen. The Hebrew used here is Olah. And when we get to Leviticus, we'll hear about the Olah offering. And what's fascinating is Jesus, the Christ, fulfilled the Olah and the Mishnah. And if you know what those two are, you will understand how he purified and atoned. And that's really important too. So he took 2 servants with him. Of course, he was a very wealthy man. He probably would never have traveled without servants. He put wood. And what's funny is there was really no reason to bring wood. Where they're going, it is an abundance of wood, and where they are is not. So he took wood with him to be prepared. So Abraham put the wood on the back of Isaac. This is a parallel to Yeshua carrying the cross. And we shouldn't miss the symbolism here. The father couldn't perform a sacrifice without a sacrificial offering, his son. And the son couldn't be sacrificed without the will of the father. So here we see the father and son, 2 attributes arriving together at the altar, each with their roles. When Yeshua died, it was the son attribute that was the sacrifice. It was the father attribute that initiated and accepted the sacrifice. So these are all important. They're shadows. God's setting up the pattern of what we're going to see. This doesn't mean Isaac's Jesus. It doesn't mean that Abraham is God. It means they are shadows. They're symbolizing what's coming. Now, Isaac was 37 years old. Sometimes we think of Isaac as being this little kid, but that really wasn't the case. This command would not have seemed strange. Human sacrifice was part of worship services in Canaan, so it wouldn't have seemed that strange to the people around him. But as Isaac was being bound, he became silent. He knew what was about to happen. The Messiah also didn't offer up any resistance. Abraham is to sacrifice his only son. God sacrificed his only son. Now, Isaac was a demonstration of a spiritual principle. He is not the anointed one, so please don't leave here thinking that. Now, 3 days after Isaac was condemned to death, because remember they had to walk, there's some time here going, he arose from the altar alive. Christ arose 3 days after he was condemned. Christ, a male sacrificial lamb, replaced us at Calvary. So there's the pattern being set up. And this is Genesis 22. This is not New Testament. This is not the Gospels. This is God setting this pattern in motion before everything else. So let's jump into Genesis chapter 23. When Sarah was 127 years old, she died at Kilbath Arba, also known as Hebron, in the land of Canaan, where Abraham mourned and wept for her. Then leaving her body, he said to the Hittite elders, "Here I am, a stranger and a foreigner among you. Please sell me a piece of land so I can give my wife a proper burial." The Hittites replied to Abraham, "Listen, my lord, you are an honored prince among us. Choose the finest of our tombs and bury her there. No one here will refuse to help you in this way." Then Abraham bowed low before the Hittites and said, "Since you are willing to help me in this way, be so kind as to ask Ephron, son of Zohar, to let me buy his cave at Mount Pelah, down at the end of his field. I will pay the full price in the presence of witnesses, so I will have a permanent burial place for my family." Ephron was sitting there among the others, and he answered Abraham as the others listened, speaking publicly before all the Hittite elders of the town. "No, my lord," he said to Abraham, "please listen to me. I will give you the field and the cave. Here in the presence of my people, I will give it to you. Go and bury your dead." Abraham again bowed low before the citizens of the land, and he replied to Ephron as everyone listened, "No, listen to me. I will buy it from you. Let me pay the full price for the field so I can bury my dead there." Ephron answered Abraham, "My lord, please listen to me. The land is worth 400 pieces of silver, but what is that between friends? Go ahead and bury your dead." So Abraham agreed to Ephron's price and paid the amount he had suggested, 400 pieces of silver, weighted according to the market standard. The Hittite elders witnessed the transaction. So Abraham bought the plot of land belonging to Ephron at Machpelah near Mamre. This included the field itself, the cave that was in it, and all the surrounding trees. It was transferred to Abraham as his permanent possession in the presence of the Hittite elders at the city gate. When Abraham buried his wife Sarah there in Canaan in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, also called Hebron, so the field and the cave were transferred from the Hittites to Abraham for use as a permanent burial place. Now, a lot of this seems a little extra. Like, why are they arguing all of this stuff when he could clearly just kind of, take it? Well, it was part tradition and then part of cultural norms. You were supposed to refuse it for free. You were supposed to offer it for free. And then you kind of go back and forth. But had he not paid a real price for it, it probably would have cost him later on. So we transition from Abraham to Isaac in chapter 23. Sarah died at 127. Imagine God finally gives you a child, but now your husband tells you, "Hey, I'm going to go sacrifice him." So she had to deal with a lot of that stress of not knowing whether he was going to live or die. God's promise of the land had not come to fruition yet either. That might be the most times I've used that word in the same sentence or the same opportunity. But Abraham used the land of others, governed by others, and didn't possess any territory. So sometimes we look at our walk with God and we say, "God, you're calling me to this," or "I believe God's behind me," or "God's building something in me," or I'm being faithful to God, but I have no land, I have no possessions, I have no honor, I have no authority, I have no money. Well, that's really where Abraham was in a sense. He had some money, he had some wealth, but he had no land of his own. So um, all he owned was a cave for his wife, himself, and his children, and a grandchild. Jacob's going to be buried there too. All three patriarchs are buried in Hebron. So if you go back to my map, and I know you can't see it here, but it's just south of Bethlehem. So check out a good map of Israel. That will help you a lot. But he was a resident alien in Canaan. Foreigners could not purchase land. For a family to sell land to a foreigner was an abomination. Interestingly, in this country, we're discussing a lot of foreign land ownership and what we should do about it. And in God's economy, he only cared about this particular piece of land, Canaan, the Israel, the chosen land. So, but he definitely thought it was an abomination. The culture thought it was, mostly because you just didn't give away your land to foreigners. That wasn't a thing. So how the land was acquired was very, very important. Had Abraham accepted it as a gift, even though it was being offered by the Hittites, it would have been an insult. So and it could have been challenged years later because he didn't pay a fair price for it. So he didn't want any of that stuff. The price of 400 shekels was very high, but by him insisting that he's happy to pay, that would have taken away most of the legal challenges. Because 10, 15 years later, somebody could have said, "Well, that was way too, he should have never bought it." But he could have said, "Well, he wouldn't have paid 400 shekels of silver if he really thought that it wasn't worth that. So I don't think he got cheated, basically, is the goal there. So that's chapter 23. We are rolling right along. I hope that you're enjoying this. If you are, please let me know. I know that sometimes you think, well, he knows, but he really doesn't. Send me a message. You can hit that little button there below the video and just say, hey, this is great, or you're the best looking guy I've ever met my whole life, or whatever it is. Just encouragement is good for anybody. Now, I want to wish you a good day. Go read chapter 24, 25, read ahead, and whenever we do these videos, it'll make a lot more sense. Now, I'm stealing a phrase from Pastor John Warren at Grace Point Church, but I liked it, so I decided I'm going to add it onto here. Love God, love people, change the world. God bless. Take care.